Now we're starting Chapter 8, the Uniform Commercial Code. The Uniform Commercial Code is often taught in Year 1 in a contracts class, and generally speaking, the terms of the UCC are different than the common law. A lot of lawyers do not use the UCC very much because they're a little intimidated by its structure. I personally found it fascinating because it's the most certain area of law that you can see. It has provisions, it's organized, it's thought out. If you really want to know the UCC, if you're in a job that deals with the sale of goods quite frequently, you need a treatise, which means a book that describes the law, called White and Summers on the Uniform Commercial Code. White and Summers, those are the two authors. It's an excellent book, and it describes the different provisions of the UCC. The UCC is a model law. It was created, kind of floated out there to see if anybody would adopt it. They were hoping that the entire United States would adopt it, and in fact they have. It's adopted everywhere, including Washington, except Louisiana, which I believe has some of the provisions, not all of the provisions. So it's not a federal law. It's actually only law when it is enacted into the state, and there are a fair number of differences between the states, so that in order to see what a particular state's UCC law is, you have to look it up. You can't just look at the model law. It is designed to aid merchants in the process of contracting. Here's the quote, or the place where you can find the RCWs, Chapter 62A. The UCC was drafted by a gentleman named Carl Llewellyn in the 1950s. His third wife, he was quite a wild socializer, worked with him on the draft. He was a legal realist. He thought that you should look and see how legal systems actually act, and then draft laws to reflect that reality. So he studied how American Indians contract, the German system, which was his own system, and others. He considered commercial law as living, and it had to constantly change, so he wanted to have something that was extremely flexible and adaptable and reflected actual practices. So he had some basic kind of default rules that are set up in Article 1, and that is that the common law applies unless it's superseded by the UCC. So in particular, regarding sale of goods over $500, the UCC will supersede the common law in that area. Yes, the parties can vary the provisions of the code by agreement, so the parties can contract around or out of the code with a couple of exceptions if they choose to. Federal statutes override the code, which is ultimately adopted at a state level, and the UCC is to be liberally construed. So, for example, Bonnie and Iris, merchants under the UCC, can exempt themselves from its provisions by saying, "We agree the UCC shall not apply." They can also say that particular provisions do not apply. Real estate and insurance is not covered by the UCC. And also, this is a change from the common law, but the UCC in Article 1 says that there's a good faith obligation that built into every contract is an obligation to act in good faith. That is definitely not part of the common law system. It is part of the Article 1 system, so that's different. Also, for the timeliness factor, it says you have to perform in a reasonable time. That's kind of a gap filler. So one of the themes of the UCC is that it provides gap fillers for pretty much everything based upon the way the parties have acted in the past. And then the parties are actually held to perform according to their past business dealings and practices. They're supposed to act in the similar way. It's called custom and usage. When I said you could contract out of the UCC, you cannot contract out of the good faith obligation. That one is supreme. You cannot contract out of that. So let's look at some examples. If you contract with someone knowing that you're really going to break the contract, that's not in good faith. It's totally cool under the common law, not in the UCC. Imagine that you have something for a part coming in, it takes 6 months. That's not a reasonable time unless the parties agree to that. And a merchant can't vary grade of a good. You'd actually be in breach of contract if you do something different than you have done in the past, assuming that is the UCC's custom and usage terms apply. Why don't you take a look at Article 1 UCC and just get a sense of how it is described. This is what we care about for Article 2. This is different than the common law. The UCC requires strict liability. So if you supply defective goods, even though you did your darndest to make sure those goods were in good shape, you're still liable for breach of contract because the UCC expects the rule of perfect tender. Let's look at some contracts covered by Article 2. It has to be for the sale of goods, not services. So a contract for cutting hair, what is that? Well, it's probably a service. Contract for a pedicure, well, it's probably a service. Contract for an oil change. Well, the question is, what predominates? Is it the good or the service? Probably the larger percentage of the money associated with an oil change is for the service, not the oil. So the argument there is the service predominates and therefore the UCC does not apply. But you can see how the arguments could be made either way. Contract for dry cleaning, probably a service. The chemicals involved probably cost very little and are not the predominant part of the contract. Lawn care, servicing. Services. Investing, probably services. And then a contract for the lease of goods is part of a separate provision. There are special provisions that deal with contracts between merchants. So merchants are held to certain obligations in the UCC. A merchant is somebody who regularly deals in the goods covered in the contract, or somebody who holds himself out as having knowledge or skill peculiar to the practices or goods involved in the transaction. Under this definition, a hobbyist can be a merchant. So if Angela and Diana sell dollhouses as a hobby, they can be held to be merchants, which puts a higher obligation on them. You know, when there is contracting, kind of formal level contracting, where somebody issues a request for proposals or an RFP, somebody submits a bid, and then there's an award of the bid to one of the parties. Well, the UCC looks at that question. The basic question there is which party's terms prevail, because every time somebody submits a document in an RFP process, a contracting process, they all have their own terms and conditions. So who prevails? The UCC, because it is leaning towards increasing contracts and fostering contract relationships, it actually says that between merchants, unless one party's document says it is ironclad, using terms basically equivalent to ironclad, the new terms that come in through the accepting documents will become part of the contract as long as they don't substantially vary the terms of the offer. So the way the UCC solves the problem of the battle of forms, it says that basically you accumulate the terms of each document that comes in with new terms. You accumulate them unless they substantially vary the terms of the offer, or one of the parties has said that their particular terms are ironclad. That puts the burden on the parties to specify when they really want their terms to prevail, and it's essential to them. Okay, as a consumer lawyer, which I did for about a year and a half, a couple of years ago, I really paid attention to warranties. Warranties under the UCC are not just from the manufacturer to the retailer. They would extend to all subsequent purchasers. So it would be manufacturer, retailer, consumer, second consumer, third consumer, etc. The warranties extend unless they are specifically disclaimed. There is an express warranty, which doesn't need to use the word warranty, but simply can be words or conduct of the seller by sample or description. So, in other words, anything that is said about a good can give rise to an express warranty. Express just means that, you know, you've got something you can point to where they've actually said or did something that gave rise to a warranty. Then we have implied warranties that exist by operation of law. These are unique to the UCC. They do not exist in the common law. There's a warranty of merchantability issued only by merchants, which says that goods must be fit for the ordinary purpose for which they were intended. A car must be a car. So when I have somebody who buys a used car from somebody, although there are attempts to disclaim warranties like crazy by the seller, I can often find a warranty of merchantability made in there somewhere, impliedly, that a car should function as a car, and you can actually sue a dealer on that ground. Not enough people do it, but there's definitely the rights to do that. Warranty of fitness for a particular purpose, that's issued by both merchants and non-merchants. If the seller knew you wanted something for a particular purpose, and if the buyer was actually relying upon the seller's good instructions, then that seller made a warranty that the good was fit for that particular purpose. Then we have warranty of title, which basically says, and this is implied, when you sell something to somebody, it's implied that you have the right to sell it. Again, it's strict liability. It doesn't matter how much care was used to prevent a problem. Let's look at the two kinds of express warranties, whether it's a specific promise in the contract or if it is a warranty by description. That's why it's so important when somebody comes to my office, my law office, and they have a problem with a car. It's really important that they kept the ad. I want to see what words were used in the ad to describe the car, because that is a warranty. Whatever they say, if they say it's a 6-cylinder red pearl Suzuki Vitara, whatever they say it is, it has to be that thing, or they've breached the warranty. And then, of course, if they show you a sample or give you a model, then the item has to be the same grade and size and have other relevant details as the sample or model that they've shown you. So if you go to a furnace store and they show you a particular model and you buy that model based upon the showroom floor model, it has to look like, it has to be that same one. Here's that warranty of merchantability again, saying that the goods are sold in a fit condition for the ordinary purpose for which they were intended. Basically, this really applies to cars, and not many people know it. Let's say you're looking at a warranty of fitness for a particular purpose. Let's say you go to REI and you say you're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and you tell them you need a 0-degree sleeping bag. If they sell you one, it has to in fact be a 0-degree sleeping bag, because you're relying upon them and their wisdom and judgment to select the right one. And so they have breached that warranty if it in fact does not act as represented. In any contract case involving warranties, the biggest challenge is figuring out who made the warranty, what is the content, and here you want specifics. You want ads, you want oral testimony, whatever you can get that proves the content of the warranty, and then you have to sue or seek some other remedy for breach. Now, when I looked at a warranty for made on cars in my former practice, I was also looking for puffery. Puffery is something that is not rise to the level of a warranty. It's basically soft and fuzzy, warm things said about a vehicle or said about some other good that don't rise to the level of something concrete and objectifiable. If you just say this is a sweet car, that doesn't actually mean anything. If you say it's the best ever, unless you're suggesting that there's an objective, verifiable test that proves that, you're probably just puffing, and that is not something you can sue over. The book talks about risk of loss here, and that is defined by the UCC. And the basic idea is when things are in transit, if they get destroyed, who suffers the loss? And that usually means who buys insurance for that. So you can contract that, or there's kind of a default provision in the UCC. And one thing is called a shipment contract, where the seller has the risk of loss until the point of shipping, or a destination contract, where the seller has the risk of loss until the goods arrive at a destination point. It's pretty clear that the seller has a broader exposure with a destination contract, and would have to get more insurance for that. The main thing to note here is that you need to actually contract for this. You need to think about it and specify it, or the default rules will apply. Article 2 has some specific remedies for buyers and sellers that are in addition to the common law remedies. You know, the common law remedies are basically you sue somebody. Under the UCC, Carl Llewellyn thought what would be helpful for people to be able to do, practically speaking. These are very practical remedies, and here they are described. Okay, let's quiz ourselves. Is Samantha's contract to have her nose pierced at Seattle Super Hair Studio governed by the UCC? Probably not. Can the UCC duty of good faith be waived? No. Look at that particular rule. Which kind of UCC shipping arrangement contract would the shipper likely wish to charge more for, and why? Obviously, because the shipper has more exposure on the destination contract, where they're on the hook for loss all the way through the destination point, the shipper would want to charge more for that. Let's look at this battle of the forms problem. Marty Latz is an individual I know. He's a Harvard professor, or he's a Harvard grad who speaks about negotiation. He is selling textbooks and he's going to sell them to Harvard. Harvard sent a purchase order, okay, that says the price and quantity of what they want. Then Latz sends over his own terms and conditions. So this is typical. You've got two forms battling each other. And there's an additional term in Marty's term and condition where he says he wants pictures of himself sprinkled throughout the bookstore every 50 feet because he's kind of egotistical. How do we know whether Marty's term is going to be effective? Well, first we have to ask, did Harvard send a purchase order that says it's ironclad? If Harvard said that, then Harvard's version of the terms and conditions would apply and Marty's would not be integrated. If, however, Harvard did not have an ironclad provision, then the new provision would come in as long as it didn't materially change the buyer's obligation under the contract. I would personally say that having to sprinkle pictures of Marty Latz throughout the bookstore would be a material change, and that term would not automatically come in. But that would basically be the argument. So the main thing in the Battle of Forms is being, especially for a test in my class, is being able to identify when, under what conditions the new terms would come in and become part of the deal. I'm going to skip my next 3 slides, but you can take a look at them and see if it helps you understand the rest of Chapter 8. That's it for Chapter 8.